quorum. Joel, can you hear us?
Yeah, I'm good.
All right, good deal. So we're going to start off with roll call from a brand new person today. May everybody meet Veronica. Go ahead and get our roll call going.
Thank you. Jason Olive.
Here.
Lauren Watson.
Here.
Joel Ward.
Joel Berth.
Here.
Kurt Roars.
Here.
Patty Serrano. Here.
She's here. All right, thank you. Now we'll do a pledge of allegiance followed by a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you, everyone. Okay, our next order of business is to approve the minutes of the June 14th, 2023 regular board meeting. Could I get a motion?
Mr. President, I move to approve the minutes of the June 14th, 2023 regular board meeting.
Thank you. Could I get a second?
I'll second that.
All right, thank you. All those in favor of approving the minutes of the 2023 June 14th regular board meeting, please say aye.
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 Thank you. The motion carries. Next, we are going to approve and ratify payroll and accounts payable vouchers. Could I get a motion, please?
Mr. President, I move to approve and ratify payroll and accounts payable vouchers.
Thank you. Could I get a second, please?
Seconded.
Thank you. All those in favor of approval of the payroll and accounts payable vouchers, please say aye.
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 All right, thank you. That brings us to correspondence. Mr. Narducci, is there any correspondence tonight?
President Olive, members of the board, there's no correspondence at this time.
Okay, thank you very much. Next, we get to hear our current events from Mr. Narducci.
Thank you. I'm just reminded right now how many people are on vacation as we look at, we have Dr. Nance over here on one side, and we have Dr. Edgar holding down the fort on the other side. So we may need Mr. Serrano and Ms. Zangiano if you want to come up, and Mr. James, if you want to come up and occupy a seat, you're more than welcome to come up to the front here. So anytime you would like to. Although we're still in June, we're ramping up in anticipation for a new school year. In fact, 1 week from today, July 5th, is when new teachers report. Returning teachers will be back the following week, and then the day we all have circled on our calendars is July 19th. That's July 19th, the first day of school with our students. Be sure to check your school website or the district website for other back-to-school information, including Meet Your Teacher. I know a lot of parents are excited about what classrooms their students are in. Please don't call the district office for that information. Call your school. We don't have that information, so that'll save you one phone call. Also, for families looking for a quality before and after school enrichment for the upcoming school year, I'd like to point out opportunities through our community education department. Staff are here all summer to assist, and registration is available online. We would encourage our families to take advantage of the quality programs we do offer. And if you come into the district office to meet with our community ed program, they are on the south side of the building. They have their parking lot right there, and that'll save you some walk in this heat. So they're on the most southern part of our district building. We're also grateful for our community partnerships. One of our longstanding partnerships is with the nonprofit for our city. This great organization is hosting their annual Operation Back to School on July 15th at Compass Church from 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. The event is now in its 10th year. Operation Back to School provides thousands of students with backpacks, school supplies, shoes, socks, underwear, and school uniforms to help ensure a smooth start of the school year for all of our students. We have several of our staff working to prepare for this event, and many city workers and volunteers. So it's really a unified event to make sure that our students are all prepared to go to school with a smile on their face and be successful on that first day of school. I'd like to remind the public that our food and nutrition department will continue to offer free meals through July 18th with our summer meals program. Breakfast and lunch are provided and served at Chandler High, Willis Junior High, and San Marcos Elementary School. Prior registration is not needed, and there is no income requirement. Anyone under 18 is encouraged to come and enjoy a healthy, nutritious meal. For many of us, we don't have to worry about that, and so we want our families, and if you know a family that is struggling, they're able to come for that free meal, and they do have a variety of choices there too for the students as well. Finally, I'd like to offer a special thank you and congratulations on your retirement. And it's your last board meeting, probably more celebration, to our behind-the-scenes, make-it-happen guy, Mr. Michael Holland. And Mike, if you can come back from the back room there, that way we can get you on front of the camera instead of behind the camera. Michael has worked for Chandler Unified School District for the past 26 years. He's not there to control the camera. There he is. There's Michael Holland. He's awesome. He's worked for the district for 26 years. You have to understand, our media productions just don't happen overnight. They're works of art. They're Emmy Award winners, and he was celebrated as a Chandler Chambers Support Staff Member of the Year, and has had incredible service not only to our district but our community through his media outreach. He has created such special programming that taught in multiple languages, that taught specific topics, science to kids. And he did some very creative, amazing work, and you'll be sorely missed here. But we know that your work won't stop, Mike, and so we want to thank you very much for all that you have done to make Chandler what it is. I mean, you can't help but go back and view the history through media, and it's got Mike Holland written all over it. So, and I know you'll say it's your team, and we know you have a great team, but thank you very much for doing all that. We appreciate you. And your booth is still doing okay. They're doing a great job back there. I know. There you go. Yeah, that's what he makes it sound like. It runs itself, but it doesn't. Also, our own Mrs. Donna Nye is retiring after serving for 18 years in the superintendent's office. Donna, you have supported many board members and 2 superintendents, and I know Dr. Castillo would agree that you do amazing work and helped us look good. You continue to help us look good all the time and get us where we need to go. You have been an amazing support to the 2 of us, our board and the district staff over these years. An interesting fact as I go through, Donna served 2 superintendents, Dr. Castillo for 16 years, me for 2. And then our prior person that was in the role, Linda Williams, served Dr. Perry and Dr. Conley, and a little bit of Dr. Castillo. And so what I'm saying is there was 4 superintendents during that time, but only 2 administrative assistants. So that consistency has been in that office for a while. And so I want to thank you for that, because that truly shows in any district, when you have consistent employees and positions, that equals the quality and really the success of a district. So we appreciate that, and what we wish you is much success in the future. Also, we wish you all the best life has to offer and many years of health and happiness to come. And thank you very much. We have some flowers there for you, and I know the board members are going to have some comments at the end, but this is my time to say that. I'd also like to welcome, I know President Olive welcomed Veronica, but Ms. Veronica King, she actually built this meeting today, so I know she's excited about it, going well. She's been in training with Donna for about a little over a month, and you did a good job building the meeting, so we won't screw it up for you. She will assume the role of executive assistant, so there'll still be only 3 executive assistants that have served 4 superintendents. So you guys are still winning that one. Veronica has had a very successful career serving in Los Angeles Public Schools, and the last 17 years in Chandler Unified serving our school sites, and most recently 9 years as executive assistant over human resources and professional development. I'm very excited, very sad to see Donna go, but I know she's very excited to get into retirement, but I'm very welcoming and very excited to work with Veronica. So welcome, Veronica. That's it.
All right. Thank you very much. That brings us to our citizens' comments. Need to read this a little bit here. This is the time for the public to comment. Members of the board may not discuss items that are not specifically identified on the agenda. Therefore, pursuant to ARS 38-431.01H, At the conclusion of the open call to the public, individual members of the public body may respond to criticism made by those who have addressed the public body, may ask staff to review a matter, or may ask that a matter be put on a future agenda. However, members of the public body shall not discuss or take legal action on matters raised during an open call to the public unless these matters are properly noticed for discussion and legal action. Tonight, we only have one speaker. We'll get 3 minutes. So we'd like to recognize, I'm going to try to do this all by myself, Zania Prusanovsky. Is that good? Zana, thank you.
Thank you, CUSD Board, for allowing me to address you this evening, and also to the teachers that are getting their rest, and bus drivers and paraprofessionals. I know sometimes you have trouble maybe like getting employment filled. You might think about doing like some mini little career fairs at the schools for some of those parents that are really local and they don't want to go through all that. So you might think about reaching out to those parents inside the school in the community. So investing in education is really investing in the community. Just want to list a few starting salaries in some districts around here. Scottsdale, $48,000, Gilbert, $52,000, Mesa, $53,500, and Chandler Unified School District starting salary, $54,296. So that's fantastic. We're really a great leader here. Budget overrides have always been an important funding measure within our city. And Chandler residents have supported these ballot initiatives in the years. So I give a kudos to our community that votes for schools that my children have attended. In the past, some years past before, Scottsdale and Gilbert voters didn't pass the budget overrides. So now they're actively trying to repass those. So investing in public education is investing in the community, jobs, and in property values. So people move to communities where education is supported. And I do feel that Chandler residents do support education. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. That brings a conclusion to our public comments for this week. Next, we are going to consent agenda. Mr. Nardici, would you like to present that?
Thank you, President Olive. President Olive, members of the board, I am presenting the consent agenda as printed and published for your approval.
Thank you. Could I get a motion?
Mr. President, I move to approve the consent agenda as published in Board Docs.
Okay, thank you. Could I get a second, please?
I'll second that.
All right, thank you. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda as presented, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you. That carries. That brings us to our action items. Our first item is proposed school district annual expenditure budget for our fiscal year 23 to 24. Mrs. Berry.
If you'll give me just a minute, Mr. President, I'm going to pull up a couple documents, if that's okay. All right, Mr. President, members of the board, tonight you're going to be asked to approve the proposed expenditure budget for fiscal year 23-24. It's amazing that we just finished a school year and we're already ready to start the next school year. And so tonight you're going to see the proposed budget. I'm actually going to do a hearing, which is required by statute, on July 12th, and I will go through a full presentation that the public will also be able to hear and ask questions at if they have questions, and then we'll go through details. But tonight, the statutory requirement is that we approve a proposed budget that we upload. We have to upload it. That's why there's 4 documents for you. There's the proposed budget. There's an Excel sheet that shows you the changes. That document does not get uploaded, but is for your review and then to help you as you look through the proposed budget. Then there's 2 other documents. There's the notification that we put the budget on the Arizona Department of Education website, and then the truth in taxation notice, because you're going to see on the 12th that, like every year, we bring to you, the board, the truth in taxation notice that we print and we're required to print in the newspaper, and it's for adjacent ways. And we have a small amount for dropout prevention that we receive. And that dollar amount we have to ask you as a board to allow us to increase the primary tax. And so it's a truth in taxation hearing that the board goes through. We present it to the public, and you vote as the board on July 12th to approve the tax for majority of that's for adjacent waste. So the 4 documents are attached. I'm only going to spend a little bit of time tonight reviewing the differences, but I'll do an actual presentation with visualizations on July 12th that you and the public will be able to see, and we'll go through in detail. Now, as you know, in our district, we have a budget committee. We also have what we call Super Q, where we negotiate salaries and benefits with our administration, our classified staff, and our certified staff. We have brought you both of those things, the budget committee recommendations and our Super Q recommendations for salaries and benefits. So you have already seen part of the process that we use to develop the budget for next fiscal year. But tonight you're going to see the proposed budget. The one that actually gets loaded to the State Department is attached. And it also will be attached to our school district. You can website. You can find our school district and other school districts on the Arizona Department of Education's website, just like our annual financial report. You can see that on our website, and you can see that on the Arizona Department of Education. And of course, all of our comprehensive annual reports that are audited are also on our website. So I wanted to make sure that you know where those documents are located. They're required by statute. It's very important for us to be transparent and to show all of our numbers. Those are always posted on our website and posted on the Arizona Department of Education website. So tonight, this is the proposed budget. It'll look the exact same when we approve the budget on July the 12th. And I'm going to now, though, bring up the Excel document that I created to just go through numbers to talk about them, so that when you're reviewing the proposed budget before we meet and actually approve the adopted budget, you understand the differences and where they came from. Now, again, like I said, I'll do detailed explanation again on the 12th, and I'll really go through numbers at that point with you to make you understand some of the changes and to hopefully educate the community about it too. The first thing you're going to see on your cover sheet of the big packet that's approved for the budget that you can review if you print it out is the cover sheet. So that's the very first thing that you're going to see in the differences. And the tax rate, we'll review the tax rate again on the 12th. As you know, assessed values have gone up, and so therefore the tax rate that was set by the legislature went down, which is called the qualifying tax rate. So that becomes part of our overall tax rate for primary, and then we also have our secondary tax. That is slightly decreased this year. Again, I'll go through the details with you on the 12th, and I'll show you some examples of that on the 12th. Our overall total aggregated school budget, again, it's on the cover sheet of the document. There's only specific funds. It doesn't include all funds because, again, it's legislatively driven. And so there's specific funds that are part of that: maintenance and operations, your unrestricted capital, your federal programs. All of those are part of the aggregated. But other funds, as you know, we have 65 specific funds in our school district that make up specific revenues, how you spend them, and then how much you can carry over in those specific funds. But the school's aggregated expenditure budget has very specific funds that are reported on the cover sheet.
I'm sorry, I have a question. It's probably a silly question and something I should know already, but if the base of the tax base goes up, basically, does the school district have to have less of an override, or?
No, so as the amount of your total expenditure budget related to your maintenance and operations budget, so in maintenance and operations, as it goes up, the voters have approved a 15% override based on our maintenance and operations budget. And so as that goes up, let's say you have more students, or the legislature gives you additional money with inflation, as that goes up, then ultimately the increase in your budget, you get to times that by 15%. If we lose a lot of students, for example, and they don't give us any money to increase for inflation or increase the base, then it potentially could go down. So some districts' overrides will go down if their budget's going down. But since our budget is going up in the sense of M&O, and we'll talk about just M&O because we don't have an override on capital or on any of our federal dollars, Our M&O budget is going up, so therefore our override, our dollar amount is going up. 15% stays the same. I can't ask for 16 or 17 or 20% because the max is 15%, and that's what our voters approved. Does that help?
Yeah, it does. I was thinking about things wrong. I'm sorry. Thank you.
That's good. All right, so our total aggregated expenditure budget has
Excuse me,
actually
before you
goes
get off
down
of
by
that.
9 million. Yes.
Getting back to the override, because this is a question a lot of people out in the public have. The 15% is the maximum amount you could draw. Now, I understand you can't do 16, 17, 18,
Yes.
but you could do 14, 13, 12, 11
You can.
if the budget didn't require you to ask for the extra money from the taxpayer. Is that correct?
That is correct. There are a few districts in the state who have asked for a less amount on their overall budget amount for their override. You can ask less, you just cannot ask more.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So our overall total aggregated expenditure limit, you're going to see from 22 to 23 has actually dropped by approximately $9 million. Majority of that we're going to talk about is related to the federal dollars, right? As we had a lot of COVID-related money in the federal line item, that's going to be where the major reduction of overall budgeted capacity is. Our M&O has gone up, and so has our capital, but federal programs have gone down. And as you know, we've been spending, right, those ESSER dollars. We have till September of 24 to finish all of that, but we have spent the majority of those dollars in the last couple of years. So you're going to see a reduction in budget capacity in the federal amount. So that's really why that decrease has taken place. Our average teacher salary has gone up almost 4%. It went from $64,895. Now our average teacher, again, is average, so you have to take all of our 2,500 certified staff members, take the salaries, and then average that. It's $67,657. That is required. It's posted online. It's posted on our website, and so you can see that with the cover sheet. Now, after the cover sheet, what you get into, there's 8 specific pages of the budget. So pages, the first page that's that you see is the cover sheet, and so you're going to see your maintenance and operations budget, which is $373 million approximately. That's approximately $6 million higher than last fiscal year when you just adopted our final revised budget in May. Then you have the unrestricted capital that has increased by $1,154,000, which our total budget is $43 million for capital. And then you're going to have federal programs. It's declined since last year, again, like I said, related to COVID, and that is $37.9 million approximately. So overall, those are the funds that make up our aggregated expenditure limit budget, and those are the major changes between those 3 groupings of funds. Now, important changes, I am going to direct you to page 7 and 8 in your budget. So when you're opening your packet, you look at page 7 and 8. It's important because that's how we generate the revenue related to our budgetary funds. So our maintenance and operations and our capital fund, 2 very specific funds that are your largest funds. And as you can recall, we've talked a little bit about this when we presented before, and we've talked to you as a board about what the changes in our maintenance and operations budget are. So right off the bat, page 7, the major changes on the revenue side are the governor and the legislature approved an increase of 2.92% overall for inflation and adjustment to the base support level. That for us generates almost $8 million. It's about $7.9 million. We also are estimating that we're going to lose approximately 200 students overall. 200 to 400 students is what we're thinking through that process, that there is $982,000 there. We have an increase in our free and reduced lunch rate, and we also have an increase in our special education weights. And so that overall, we're getting approximately about $208,000. We have a teacher experience index reduction. That's for the number of years of experience for our teachers compared to the average of all the districts across Arizona. We still receive quite a bit of money from that, but it's slightly down due to either our years of service or how the average years of service has changed throughout the state. It's a factored amount compared to other districts. That has slightly gone down. We have that number in. It's based on last year's numbers, $297,000. Our transportation does not change. We did not have additional route miles, so therefore there's not any increase in that piece. The override, and Mr. Olive, you had asked this question, we will have additional amount of money for the override at $1.8 million, and the reason for that, it's based on last year's ADM, but this year's base support level. So as inflation went up and we received the 2.9%, also because we have additional money for SPED and for free and reduced lunch, we have an increase. So that's why there will be an additional $1.8 million. We have a decrease in our overall M&O budget. As you know, we carried over an amount in our M&O budget. We've utilized that this year, and we have a plan to utilize the last portion. We'll have about $11 million in carryover next year, going into 23-24, and that will be used for the initiatives that we have for mental health, and then also for the stipends that were approved through the Super Q agreement. As you can recall, we expensed certain things in our 100th day funding that was through the Governor Ducey, and then it was changed into a different grant underneath the new governor. We expensed those dollars, and then we moved that into M&O dollars that we were able to utilize for mental health.
Just a second, just to understand this. So how much do we start carrying forward from last year?
From last year, we had $25 million for
25,
22,
okay.
23.
And then essentially you allocated 14 elsewhere, is that
did.
what that means?
Yes, we did that in the budget process starting in June last year.
Okay, so there's 11
There's
left to
11
be
million left.
essentially allocated, right?
Yes, and we have it allocated. We already, in the Super Q process, we took a portion of that to give classified staff $2,000 stipend, certified administration $1,000 stipend. That's almost, I want to say a little over $7 million, and then we have $4.5 million that we have set aside particularly for each of our schools to work through some of the mental health needs that we have at our schools.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I'll go through that again on the 12th too with the details on that. We also have an increase in our audit services, as you know.
Lana, hold on a minute, please. I couldn't hear Kurt. Could you have him speak into it a little louder? I didn't hear what he was really saying.
Okay, what I was saying is that I wanted to know what we carried forward total to start, which is about 25 million, I'm sorry. And then on this report, about 14 million has already been allocated as of here, and there's 11 million left of the 25 million, which apparently has also been allocated.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the
Gotcha,
question.
thank you. Thank you.
Good recap. Thank you. Our audit services go up. As you know, we are audited every year. Our auditors spend a couple weeks here in the summer and then spend a few weeks offsite compiling our audited financial statements. If we spend more than $300,000 on a federal grant, they have to audit that. And as you know, we have a lot of federal grants, and there's a lot of additional test work to do in that. And so our increase in our audit services is approximately $31,000. Registered warrants that we have, as you know, we pay everything. We receive money from the state, from our property taxes, and then again from federal and local funds. As you know, and we bring to you as a board, which we'll be bringing to you in the future, is we ultimately sell TANs, tax anticipation notes. We didn't have to this year, but we ultimately had negative cash at certain points, and so with that, you have to register warrants. This year, we will be bringing that to you probably in the August board meeting, if we don't in July, and we will be asking you to have the authority to sell TANs. The county treasurer counts for our cash, but our cash doesn't always match our budget, as you all know, because it depends on when the revenue comes in from the state, from the local taxpayers, and from their other funds. And so ultimately, if there is not enough cash, then our county or our treasurer registers warrants, and then ultimately we get to budget to cover those registered warrants. Yes.
I know that the state, a number of years ago, had delayed payment for the previous year until the new year. Are they still doing that? And about how much of that, how much is that for our district that we don't get until after the year is over?
Great question. Thank you for that. So we actually will receive about $39 million next year in July of 24. That's really for the 23-24 year that ends June of 24. So they've delayed almost 2.5 payments, $39 million.
You mean 23 or 24?
24. So what'll happen is it's for 23-24 fiscal year, but it won't get paid till actually 24-25 fiscal year in July of 24. So they delay it. The fiscal year is 23-24. They delay 2.5 payments worth of state aid because they borrowed almost $900 million from the budget, and they have to pay it to us in the next fiscal year in 24-25.
Lana, make sure you talk into the microphone, please.
Okay, absolutely. Can everybody hear me pretty good? Okay, great. So they delayed back in the Great Recession. They delayed almost 3 payments worth, 2.5, a little over 2.5. For our district next year, that's a delay of $39 million. So we won't receive our state aid of $39 million in until July of 24, which is really the next fiscal year. So that's why we have to be very careful with the cash that we do have on hand to make sure that we can make payroll and accounts payable. We can pay our accounts payable, our bills. And so that's why you as a board will see us sell tax anticipation notes to make sure we have enough cash to cover the payments for payroll and accounts payable. It's also really important to have reserve funds because that is part of your cash sometimes too. So overall, that's important too.
What kind of interest rate do we pay on the tax anticipation notices?
Well, it used to be hardly anything. Now, the truth, it's gone up. And I'll give you the exact amount when we come in August. We'll have a good idea, but it's definitely gone up. And same thing with our registered warrants, as interest goes up, has gone up. But I will give you the new amount. I don't want to quote the wrong amount, or I'll quote it correctly.
I don't need an exact amount. I was just wondering what the scope of the hit was.
Yes. Now, the good thing is for us is that's why you see the line. It allows us to budget for the payment for the interest on registered warrants and for the payment on TAN. So it allows us to actually tax for that piece if we have to utilize those. So even though the state can't pay us, unfortunately, our locals taxpayers have to pay that difference for us having to register warrants or to sell tax anticipation.
Okay,
notes.
thank
But
you.
it allows us to budget for it, so we don't lose budget capacity, which is a good thing. Now, the biggest area you're going to see a change in is the additional funding for Prop 123. We receive about $3 million from Prop 123, which was passed in May of 2016. But the additional money, if you heard when the budget was settled with our legislature, they gave us an additional 3% for one-time funding. So for a one-time funding source, 3%, and that's going to be a little over, around $8 million for us, a little over $8 million. And that money is one-time payment to help with the inflation costs that our employees are seeing, that our districts are seeing on goods and services. So with that, we will be meeting with our Super Q, our group of classified, certified, and administrators in July, and then we'll be bringing back to the board what we're going to do with that 3% in giving out one-time allocation to staff and to cover expenses in the district. So we'll bring that back to the board, but we'll have budgeted for it in a lump sum in maintenance and operations, so we're prepared for that. But we still need to meet with our employee groups once they come back here in July, and then we will bring that back to the board in August for what we're going to do for staff and to cover expenses, especially according to inflation in our district. But that's where the line is. So if you're on page 7, that's why that amount has went up, and that's where we're recording it. And Mr. Olive, you had asked about, is that part, that is not included in the override, so therefore there's not an increase. I can't tax the 15% on that piece. It's separated out and on that line item. And it's really because it's one time. So those are the major changes. When you add all of those up, our maintenance and operations budget, like you can see on the cover sheets, $373 million. It is up $6.2 million from the previous year. The biggest change is related to our carryover in M&O on page 7. On page 8 is the revenue for our unrestricted capital. So when you review that, you can see the allocation for this year and our carryover. As the board knows, we've been reviewing with you our technology budget that we're going to be using to make sure that we are going now one-to-one, and we have interactive flat panels in front of all of our teachers in their classrooms, and then we also have our infrastructure related to our Wi-Fi and our technology needs. We're utilizing a lot of our carryover, and we'll go over that again on the 12th on the actual expenditures. But the increase in our overall capital is $1.1 million. A great thing and a fight that we've been fighting for is to get capital restored, which it was restored during the Ducey administration. And then we've been very fortunate last year, and it was honored again this year. We're actually getting inflation finally on our capital dollars. So you'll see some of those increases, which have been great. All right, after that, on pages 1 through 4, actually 1 through 6, are our expenditures. So now we have to take what amount of money do we bring in due to the number of students we have, the miles we drive, the amount we bring in for federal and state grants. But now we have to show how we're going to expense those dollars, and that has to match the amount that we bring in. So pages 1 through 6 go over the expenditure side of things. If you add pages 1 through 4, because those are your maintenance and operations, your unrestricted capital, your maintenance and operations, and your unrestricted capital and your Prop 301, the net difference between that is $2.4 million. And I bring that up because we consider those our major levy funds in the sense that they are brought in based on taxes. If it's either from the state, through the state general fund, if it's through sales tax, if it's through property tax, all those pieces. Those are your main 3 funds. We've went over some of the major changes. You've seen those when we did the MP 5000s. We have met as a group. The one big change that we have not allocated, but we know we will, is the amount for the 3% that the state gave to us that was additional. We'll be bringing that back to you in August as we give out, like I said, a one-time stipend to our staff. But we will go over, again, those changes on July 12th. The biggest changes in capital are just the same ones that we reviewed when we did the technology budget. I think you're seeing a majority of our normal budget be accounted for with White Fleet, with also majority of it with our textbooks, and then our technology department as we lay out our technology plan that we've been presenting to the board.
So just a second. So that $18 million, is that almost all technology spending? Because I noticed our technology budget is $18 million. So.
Actually, our technology budget is $30 million. The one that I presented to you when we met in the planning committee was $30 million.
Okay.
So about, and we can review all those numbers again, and I'll probably pull that up on the 12th. There's a number of things that make up a technology budget. There's software, for example, that's $8 million. There's infrastructure related to network drops and Wi-Fi and hubs that are a certain portion. There are our laptops, and if you think you have to replace laptops about one in every 4 years, there's going to be, and we have 50,000 between staff and students, and we're replacing every 4 years. There's a certain portion of computers, desktop and laptop devices that we're replacing. We also have cybersecurity stuff in that. We also have security cameras that are a part of that piece. And so in that technology budget that we broke out and shared with the board, there's a request for about $30 million per year. That is covered through capital and through bond funds and through E-rate funding. So there's 3 different funding sources that cover a majority of all of that.
Okay, so
Okay, I'll try to talk more into the microphone.
well, the reason I said that, because I was looking at the detail sheet, and it talks about technology, hardware, and software spending of $18,586. So that's kind of where I got that number. And the reason I want to highlight that, I just want to make sure the public knows how much we're spending on technology now. It is just skyrocketing. So, we need to be aware of what's going on in education now and where the money's going.
And thank you for bringing that up. We are a school district with 45,000 students and 5,000 staff members. We're bigger than most Midwestern towns. And so just, unfortunately, we haven't been able to invest a lot in technology. This just helps us get up to par related to having one device for every student and employee, being able to have the interactive boards in the front of the classroom, which majority of school districts have, a stable network, and the normal things to protect, which is really important, through cybersecurity, and our software systems that we use academically and on the support side of the house. Because remember, we don't only serve kids, but we also have to have the systems to support our kids too. Either it's a financial software system or if it's our maintenance system that helps to keep care of our 6 million square feet. All of those are part of our technology budget. So we've done a really good job this year of putting together a budget to outline just the basic needs to cover that. And that's going to be a huge portion to take care of with our capital budget and our bonds. We're very thankful again to our voters for approving our bonds that help us to support that need.
A question about
Yes.
Security cameras are a technology, but do they go into technology stuff, or are they more like security stuff for accounting purposes? Is it part of that 18, or is it part of the whatever is above the 18?
We have now transitioned into, and actually we just had this discussion at the trust board meeting the other day, is there so much of security is linked with our IT staff, because ultimately we're having to review, we're having to put them on we're having to give them feeds, address them. Colleen Flannery is our executive director, or she's our CTO, our chief technology officer, and she's in charge of that arena, putting up the security cameras. Now, she works hand in hand with our executive director, Tom Dunn, and together they put that they facilitate where the cameras go, how they're installed, but we have put it underneath our technology budget. Now, we've been paying for that with bond dollars in the past, but it'll have to come out of both in the future. We're going to build a budget that's both sustained with capital and with bond dollars for the future. But it has become, I think, more with technology over the last handful of years because there's such a need for it. And then, of course, they're working directly Our technology staff is working directly with our executive directors over our schools when there's discipline issues, trying to pull it up, manage it, retain it, all of those things.
Okay, so maybe you can clarify a little bit the difference between bond dollars and unrestricted capital, because I think what you were trying to explain is a lot of that's coming out of unrestricted capital right now, and you're going to try and move it back and forth however you do it with bond dollars, which is a different thing from my understanding. Is that correct?
Yes, so everyone in the state of Arizona receives a certain allocation for unrestricted capital per student that you have. And unfortunately,
what does that mean for the public?
unrestricted capital. So there, you can use unrestricted capital to purchase physical things. You can purchase desks, books, buses, or you can build facilities or renovate facilities. Unfortunately,
And security cameras, like
all of
Mr.
it.
Allison,
It's
okay.
furniture
All
and
right.
equipment,
Very good.
remodel, all of those pieces. Bonds are for buildings, buses, and technologies, but the voters have to approve, and it's based on a local tax and can fund and support bonds that pay for things like buses, buildings, technologies, those big ticket items. We're fortunate in, and you know, Mr. Roars, you've been on every budget committee and bond committee and supported us. Thank you so much for doing that. But we have been very fortunate where our voters have actually supported us in making sure that we have the things that we need related to construction, buildings, renovations, buses, technology products, all of those things. And so we have, part of the bond has a technology line item in it to support us for technology. Unfortunately, we don't have enough in that to support our needs. And especially since COVID took place, I think all of us knew we needed more in technology, but now we're really seeing the need as everyone pretty much throughout the state has gone to one-to-one, has the basic technology needs that set up a 21st century classroom. And so we are going to utilize both our bond dollars, which our voters have already approved and have a line for that, and our capital dollars to meet that capital budget that we need to support Chandler Unified. And again, we're the second largest school district, so when you see those numbers, sometimes people think that's large, but people don't understand 50,000 people come and work on our campuses or attend our campuses every day. So to support that kind of infrastructure is a big spend. It's hard for people to understand that dollar amount until they understand how large we are, that we're bigger. Like I said, I was in Beloit, Wisconsin. My son plays baseball there. We're bigger than the town that he plays baseball in, just in the number of kids we have. So it just shows you how big our district is.
Yeah, just the distinction I was trying to make for the people is that those are two different sources of funds, bond dollars and unrestricted capital dollars, which aren't necessarily M&O, but they're kind of in that category.
Right. They
Okay,
are. Yep.
that's all I wanted to
Different pockets.
say. Okay.
Yep.
Different
One of our
pockets.
65 funds, but two very important funds of those 65 different ones. Okay, our changes on pages 1 through 4, like I communicated, most of those changes are actually to do, as we talked about, maintenance and operation went up, and we approved raises out of that, some of the different expenditures that we put through the MP 5000s. And also Prop 301 change. We actually have less spending. You can see on page 3, and very specifically, $4.9 million in changes in Prop 301. So I wanted to bring that out specifically and why. I need to talk a little bit about that. We actually went up in the amount per pupil that we get for Prop 301. We're up to $758. That's Prop 301 is based off of sales tax, and sales tax has been extremely high since COVID. And in our state, not only from the use of goods, but also I think the construction side has also, with the sale of supplies related to that, you've seen a huge increase in your sales tax. But we last year, as you know, the law changed. It's all underneath one fund and not 3 funds any longer. So with that, we also changed. We have a certain dollar amount that comes out of each teacher's contract that comes from Prop 301 and a dollar amount that comes from M&O or let's say Title I or our JTED funds, depending on which funding source that is. We also gave out stipends last year, as you can recall, out of Prop 301, and we plan to do that again this year. We've already met with our meet and confer group on that. And so ultimately, overall, we used up some of the carryover in that fund specifically. That's why there's a decrease of $4.9 million, because we're trying to spend that additional dollars. What we're being very careful on is, as you know, prior to 2020, the amount was approximately $427 per pupil. It has skyrocketed since COVID and is now at $758. We're still being careful because we saw, as you remember, when over in the Great Recession, it dropped drastically. So we want to make sure that is a huge chunk of money that goes into our teacher salaries. We want to make sure we protect it. So we have a lot of one-time stipends that come out of that. We negotiate that every year, but we're very careful about making that permanent because we can't always sustain that if sales tax goes down. So we're very careful with how we structure, how we pay that, either part of the contract or as a stipend. But ultimately, we're utilizing up the extra, the carryover that we have in that fund. The next one is page 5. On page 5, there's two important funds. We have our bond building funds. That's for new construction, renovation, and technology. Again, our bonds, our voters approved in 2019, $290 million worth of bonds. We have a budgeted change of $18 million based on the projects that we have this year. And so that's just an increase in the amount that we plan to spend. So again, remember, this is the budget that we're planning to spend in that fund. It's that increase. So again, these are just the changes. If you were to take last year's budget and this year's budget, those are the changes. Adjacent ways, we're keeping adjacent ways.
Hang on just a second.
Yes. Did you have a question, Mr. Worth?
Yeah, you kind of go in and out on the microphone. That's why I'm losing you.
Is there anything else I can do? Anybody else?
See, right now I can't hear you.
Suzanne, just speak this way.
Okay, sorry. I apologize. I'll try to stay closer to the microphone.
Okay, but the major construction project is the rebuild of Galveston. Is that what most of this is?
That's one of the major projects. We also have our buses that we're purchasing. Those are majors. We have the turf fields, like you'll see one of the items in the first stage of our turf fields that are coming about right now. We have a number of reimagining projects that are taking place. We also have some of our preventative maintenance that we've presented to the board. Those are some of the major expenditures in there. So there's a number of items that are in the capital plan. We can go back and refer to some of the board meetings that we had. There's some notes that have specifics, so I can send those out too. Well, again, and I'll try to cover some more of that in detail on July 12th. Adjacent ways, we're asking to do an additional $2.5 million this year. So again, we have a few projects. One in particular is our new build, the Galveston Elementary, as we pull utilities to that. We also have, if you've been out to our transportation facility, there is a road that will have to be finished that will be in conjunction with the city. Thank you. We're going to try a different one, Joel. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay. Is that one on? Okay, great. Okay, so those are the two main projects that will be taking place over the next year. And so we will be asking the board to authorize a truth in or a tax for adjacent ways. And it'll be $2.5 million, yes.
How much do we have left that you could possibly spend adjacent ways, or is it maxed out? Or
we actually do. We're carrying over a few $1 million in that so that we can cover both projects. We need 2.5 to cover both projects.
Okay, thank you.
2.5 additional from what's being carried over. Okay.
Yes.
And that 2.5 million goes on the property tax bill for next year for people.
It does, and it is actually the hearing notice that you see that's attached on the document.
No, I understand.
The one that's on there, the tax will be on a $100,000 home. It'll be $6.75, which is ultimately, so if you had a $200,000 home, you could double that. Last year, and then you can see also that there's a 28 cents tax. That's for dropout prevention. We have a little over $100,000 that we have that's been grandfathered in for dropout prevention. And so it asks every year, the truth in taxation law is that if you have anything, if you're taxing for that, you have to publish it in the newspaper, and then your board has the authorization to tax the community for that. That's the only thing the board actually has authorization to increase the tax for in our district for the things that we have is for adjacent ways. As you know, the legislature sets the qualifying tax rate, which ultimately guides our primary tax rate. And then the voters, when they approve an override and a bond, that's how ultimately the authority to increase the tax on the secondary side. But this is the one thing that the board has the ability to actually increase on the taxes through adjacent ways.
Okay, so nobody has a $100,000 house. So for a $500,000 house, and I didn't catch the number you said per 100,000.
Sure.
It's about what?
And it's right on the document. It's $6.75. So you would times that for a $500,000 house. You would times that by 5. So you'd be at $33 approximately.
Go ahead, Patty.
And that's over a year.
Lana, can I follow up with a quick question? I'm curious about the statement you made regarding the road building in collaboration with the city.
Yes.
Do we have an estimate of what that collaboration will look like as far as who's carrying what percentage of the cost?
Right, we have to cover half of it, and the city will
okay.
have to cover half.
Okay.
Yes.
Thanks.
Okay, all right, so now on to page 6, our federal dollars. There are some major changes in the federal amounts. As you know, ESSER 3, we have spent a portion of that, so our budget overall is going to decrease by 9.1 compared to last year. Again, remember the items in yellow are the decrease or increase compared to the budget from the year before. So if you were to pull both budgets up, these are the increases or decreases. Fund 353 is called Educational Disparities and Teacher Development, and that is $3.3 million approximately that we've applied for through the new governor's grant system. Then we have the Fund 350 and Fund 351. These were Governor Ducey originally called these the Education Plus Up Grant and the 100th Day Grant. Those two then, they were collapsed, and we had to apply underneath the new governor's requirements for Fund 352, and they're called the ARPA Support for Arizona LEAs. We were approved for those two grants and the differences in those, but we've already spent part of those, so that's why you see the decrease. It's because compared to last year, we have spent that portion. We only have a small portion left in each of those, and all of that was approved by the state.
So just to understand, because I know you understand all this stuff, but we're slower.
Sure.
Okay. There's a half a dozen funds here where the grants have essentially expired. Okay, that's what it says. But I think what you're saying is they've expired and then being refunded in a new way in this new Fund 352. How much actually got carried over? Because we're dropping almost $12 million here. How much do we pick up on the other one?
Sure. So okay, let me go back and explain a couple things. So again, on this sheet, the yellow is just the difference in the budget compared from last year, from 22, 23, to this fiscal year, 23, 24. If you actually went to the sheets and the documents, if you went to page 6 and you turned to that, for example, you can go look at specific funding, but all of the federal grants that are competitive are lumped together that you can see on page 6. If you were to go down to line 17, you would see that our prior year was $33 million, and now this year is $17 million. They're part of all of those because, as you know, we have multiple federal grants within that. I just wanted to outline a couple different specific funds that have reduced, and I wanted to bring up to you that they did get approved for the same allocation of what was in there in the prior year with Governor Ducey when he had approved the 100th Day Grant and the Plus Up Grant. Now, of course, our budget has decreased because we've spent those dollars. They were one-time amounts. You could spend them over a couple years. And so obviously our budget this year has declined or decreased, but that money is still there. And we did get awarded every penny that we had in the Plus Up Grant and the 100th Day. I believe altogether, I want to say there was around $7 million, but again, I don't know that number off the top of my head for that specific amount for this.
So, excuse me, I'm a little bit confused because you talk about, this says federal projects, and you talk about Governor Ducey and state level. Those, in my mind, aren't the same thing. Are they just all lumped together, federal and state grants, all in this one line item, or what's going on there?
So page 6 has your federal project fees and expenditures. So Title I is on line 1, and there's specific grants that are lined out. You can read through those, lines 1 all the way down through 18. On line 18, there's federal grants, and those are funds that are very specific, 300 through 399. Most of those are competitive grants or grants that run from the federal government that go specifically through the state and then are distributed to us. So a number of those grants, majority of the grants do that. They go directly from the federal government to the state and then they're allocated to us. So as you know, the ESSER money was allocated from the federal government, went to the State Department and came to us. And it was based off of Title I and our poverty rates. Then also Governor Ducey was allocated a certain amount of money through federal dollars that he could spend in his discretion. So they were called discretionary grants that we applied for or that were given to us. He then allowed some of that pocket of money to be spent, and he had 2 specific grants that he allowed us to apply for. We were able to apply for the 100th Day funding, and we were able to apply for the Education Plus Up grant. When Governor Hobbs came on staff, they had a cease and desist letter from the federal government related to those grants. And so ultimately, she knew districts relied on those dollars. So she had to close those grants down to be in compliance with the federal government. Then she opened them up underneath an umbrella with criteria. We were then able to reapply for those expenditures. They were approved, and now we have those dollars, and we have to just report them underneath a different fund. So it's the same dollar amount overall that we received.
So to answer the two questions, it's, it is federal money, the state's the middleman. And that's why we go back and forth between the two.
Yes,
And-
for
and the answer-
almost all federal funds, that's the way.
And the answer to the second question, when all these got closed down, all that money got transferred into a new grant, is that the same amount? I mean,
So-
is it a wash?
So it never gets transferred. What happened originally was we received, we got told we could spend up to a certain amount. How federal grants work is that you spend it, then you get reimbursed by the state. So the state, you send in what's called a cash management report, or you send in a completion, you do a cash drawdown with the state. So we had spent up to a certain amount of dollars, and then we were reimbursed, and that got put under the 100th day and the Plus Up grant. Then we had an allocation left of what we already got previously approved for, and we knew we were spending that. For example, in February, we had stipends that were approved and needed to be paid. So now we had to apply for the grant. That money is moved into Fund 352, and then ultimately we're reimbursed underneath that fund. There's no moving of revenue between funds. That's not allowed whatsoever. You can move expenditures between funds, so you can expense it and do a journal entry into a different fund, but you can't move cash from a revenue from one fund into another.
No, I understand, I
It's not allowed.
misspoke, but is it a wash in our budget? That's
It
the
is.
question.
It-
Okay,
it's-
there we go. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so the next one that we have coming down is the Fund 360, which is the fiscal year 22 Arizona On Track Summer School. So as we, last year, we finished up into summer school through the summer, even into July, but there is a decrease of that budget going in to the fiscal year. So that's why you're seeing that reduction of that summer school. The other thing I wanted to point out, and there's a zero on this for a change of Fund 362. We have applied for the summer school for 23, but actually I probably should have put it in the revised budget. We didn't know if we would get it or not in May. We just found out before the beginning of the summer that we were approved for summer school for this year. Summer school is only in June this year, and so you're not going to see it on the 23-24 budget because summer school is going to get paid in 22-23. So anyways, that's just more of when it was accounted for and in the budget. But it is the last year that we believe that funding source will be there, because again, it was part of ESSER. E-rate is the other budget that you'll want to look at on page 6 again. There's a decrease in our E-rate funding overall. We have funding for two categories. Category 1 is for like our internet services, our Wi-Fi services. And then Category 2, we get $150 approximately per student every 5 years. So we take the number of students that we have times $150, and you can spend for E-rate projects in a total of 5 years that money on infrastructure needs. And so we used up almost all of that in this past year, and so that's why you're seeing that budget reduction. The next one is our CCEIP. We won't know that. We distribute. We'll bring that when we revise the budget. We'll know when Dr. Fletcher gives us how many people have approved the AP exams. We'll know how much money we receive in and how much we will have to allocate out. So we'll wait on that and give you that when we revise the budget. As you know, results-based funding is going away. Governor Hobbs has moved results-based funding specifically into the base. That's part of the base that was the 2.92%. And so ultimately, the results-based funding our budget is decreasing by $2.3 million because we only will have our carryover next year, which I think it will be around $2.5 million or so in our carryover for next year. So we only have that. That'll be one time. It's at our school level, and there's some at the district level, and we will utilize that next year. But it has gone away. Fund 467, the school safety grant changes. We have increased as we applied, and there's an increase for social workers. That increase is $2.8 million. Building renewal, this is anticipation, but we did budget for it. We have put in an application for the Chandler High School roof project. And so we're hoping that we get funded with that with the state through the School Facilities Board, and that is approximately $6.2 million. Have not gotten that, so I wanted to make sure that you know that, but we have applied for it. We've done all the work ahead of time so that we're ready to go, but ultimately, that would, if we get funded, it'll be approximately $6.2 million to replace the Chandler High School roof. Other funds, then one of the major funds, as you know, is our food service fund. And as we decrease with the anticipation of some of our summer programs and some of the funding sources for that, and as our universal lunch programs decrease, we're seeing a decrease in our amount of participation as students have not been able to access that funding. And then also we're declining, as you know, our elementaries especially, where more students eat, especially in our elementaries. As we decline as a school district, we're seeing that participation decrease. Our free and reduced has actually been decreasing too, so that's a portion of that amount budgetary-wise. We match our budget with our revenue and food service, and we're going to see it. We're starting to see decreases based on ADM, based on the lower free and reduced, and then no extensions related to universal free lunch and summer programs.
Yeah. What does SSO stand for, please?
I wrote that down because I always forget the specific of what that's called. I had Lauren help me today. It is called Seamless Summer and Other Options. Because I don't always pronounce that right. Like some of the acronyms. Good question. All right. The last one is Funds 525, our auxiliary funds. You're going to see an increase in the budget for that of $756,000. And the reason for that is field trip costs have gone up. As you can imagine, I'm sure as you're traveling and seeing the expenses go up, we're also seeing those expenses, especially due to our field trips and travel-related expenditures. And so as you all approved the fee schedule for our schools, we're seeing that increase, but it's just costing a lot more for some of the places and experiences that our students are going to in the future. Now, there's a lot of other funds. Like I said, we have 65 different funding sources that are made up and part of this overall budget package. The ones that I highlighted are the major differences, and again, the yellow area is just the major changes between 22, 23, and 23, 24. It's not the budget, it's just the changes in that. You can go to the actual budget forms to see those changes. And again, just wanted to highlight the truth in taxation notice so you know that it's in the paper in case you have a constituent who asks you questions about that. We will again have a hearing on the budget, and we'll have a hearing on the truth in taxation notice on July 12th.
All right. Thank you very much, Ms. Berry. Does anybody have any questions about things in general? Mr. Roars?
Yeah, just a couple of things I just wanted to highlight for the audience here. When we talked about average teacher salaries, you're up to $67,657, which is great. I'm sure our teachers appreciate that. But the percentage increase says 4%, and I thought we voted for a 3% increase, and I couldn't explain that.
We do, but we also include our Prop 301 piece in there too.
This one's kind of in the weeds. Well, actually, I'm going to skip that one. Ask you some other time. But federal products, all that stuff. Oh, CTE education. It looks like we're down about $500,000 from what we spent last year. I'd really like to see that increase. He's a big proponent of career technical education. So why would that be?
Again, that's the budget. So we spent a number of things. We did some projects within CTE. As you know, we have enhanced. If you've been over to Chandler High School, we're really proud of the things we've done. So we spent money over there. We spent some of our carryover. We carry over funds in our CTE specific fund. We were able to do some really cool, if you go over, there's some pretty neat things happening at Chandler High School. I'd love to show it off if you haven't been there. We used CTE dollars to enhance that facility to meet the needs to start the programs last year. So that's why you're seeing a budget expenditure decreases, because we don't have as much carryover in those funds to spend. We bring in a dollar allocation, and then of course we have the carryover from the previous year. So that's your budget for the next fiscal year.
So actually turned out to be capital upgrades in one sense. Was that?
Yes, and CTE
Okay.
funds
All
can
right.
be spent on operating and furniture and equipment, technology. Those are the restrictions. Again, every fund has the amount that you receive, there's specific regulations on that, and then how you can spend those dollars, and then what you can carry over. So CTE is very specific. You can't spend it on anything but CTE, and it's got to be 9th through 12th. It can't be K through 8. There's all kinds of regulations, and I can't move things in and out of that fund. It's very specific.
Okay. Just wanted to point out that we have 2,275 teachers as in the budget, which is great, and 18.3 to 1 ratio. People ask about that quite a bit.
Yes, that's great. Thank you. Of those 2,275 teachers, we also have other certified staff members that aren't teachers. So our certified group is approximately, I think, 2,500 overall certified staff members. That was, so I apologize, that was the number that we were talking about, was certified staff members overall.
And I think the rest can wait till the July 12th
Okay.
hearing. So thank you very
Great.
much.
If you have any questions during the two weeks too, also let me know.
All right, great. Does anybody else have any other questions?
You're welcome.
All right, Joel, you okay? All right, so,
Mr. President,
yes,
I move to approve the 2023-2024 school and district annual expenditure budget for publication.
okay, thank you. Could I get a second?
I will second. Oh, I think Joel wanted to, though.
Hello?
Can you hear us, Joel?
Yes.
Okay.
All right,
It's really approving a preliminary budget, right?
It's just for publication.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't think that was preliminary.
okay. Is there any further discussion before we vote on this one? Does anybody have any other questions? If not, then we can go ahead and vote. All those in favor of approving the budget for publication, please say aye. Aye?
Aye.
All right, that carries. Thank you very much. That brings us to our next order of business, the Basha High School turf field conversion.
It'll be me tonight.
That'll be you tonight. Tom is not around. Tom's on vacation, I guess, right?
I wish I was as good as Tom at this, but I am here to present it tonight. So, Mr. President, members of the board, the district seeks to convert our high school stadium fields to synthetic turf over the course of 3 phases. Basha High School will be part of phase 1, and pending board approval, construction will begin in December of 2023. The scope of work will include removal of natural turf, installation of synthetic turf, cooling infield and shock pad, storm drain system. A request for qualifications, an RFQ, was issued and Core Construction was selected as the general contractor of record. The district has negotiated a guaranteed maximum price, a GMP, for Basha High School in the amount of $2,874,699, which the district believes is fair and reasonable given current market conditions. Recommend approval of Core Construction for turf conversion at Basha High School in the amount of $2,874,699.
All right, thank you, Ms. Berry. Does anybody have any questions about turf fields for now?
Yeah, when this came up a few months ago, and I think we were going to do 3 of them, and I thought the number was about $2 million each. And has this increased substantially?
It has. We originally did estimate that it was approximately $2 million. We do, I think market conditions have increased cost, labor, supplies, all of those pieces. But also, we found that there are some things that you can shave off, but we wanted to make sure that we had proper drainage, that it's installed correctly, and some of those on the infrastructure side to make sure that it's properly done so that when we go to replace this, it's not as expensive. We're only replacing the actual field in the future, but we wanted to make sure it was done right. One thing we found is you want to make sure that it's done right so that you're not later on coming back or having to replace things in the future for the extra expense. So we have done a good job of going out, reviewing fields across not only high school fields, but college athletic fields, and work through a number of things with our contractors and our architects to feel like this is a reasonable amount to take care of the needs that we have for our district.
Okay, we're going to do 6 of these, is that right?
We are.
Okay, so the price has gone from $12 million to whatever 2.8 times 6 is, but
Yeah, we're going to do
15
5 out of
16
6.
million?
There is one school that we're not going to do. Currently, our ACP Erie, we're going to wait. We just installed that field a few years ago, so that field we're going to wait on. But we will do the other 5 fields, and we do believe we'll spend about $14.5 million. We've budgeted for that. That's the budget we've had in there. Since we met with you and did that in the planning session, we have had about $14.5 million for the project.
Lana, I have some questions.
Yes, go ahead.
I got to tell you, I'm struggling with this one because there's a bit of a movement out there to eliminate and go back to grass. The fields are extremely hot. There's some questions about it environmentally. I'm just struggling with it, to be honest with you. Not quite sure why we're doing it.
Joe, we had a couple of planning sessions on this and brought to you all the research. One, it's our job in the phase 2 drought that the city is also involved in, and it's part of our water conservation piece that we're participating in. Our fields take an incredible amount of water and an incredible amount of time. It also increases community use and access to our fields. Right now, as you know, you've been here for many years, that our community really isn't able to utilize our football fields based on the fact that the turf is really hard to grow, and especially trying to keep weeds out of it becomes an issue. So our fields are pretty much closed down. And then it also provides opportunity for other student body activities to happen on those fields and not just football, so that they're available for every other group. And soccer isn't playing, for example, in dirt and mud, which become conditions that become almost safety issue for them when they're playing. So the use of the turf is quite extended. We are doing our effort at conserving. As you've studied the city, they're also moving some of their parks to synthetic fields as well, to try to do their part also, with the realization that water is an issue here, and our fields take up a lot of space, a lot of resource with water use.
Linda talked to me quite a bit about how they've improved the heat issues on the fields. But I guess at the end of the day, the water is a real issue and it's important, so I guess I'll back off.
The other thing too, Mr. Worth, I think that we found important on the fiscal side was eventually the payoff, we think, is approximately 8 to 9 years, but we'll be using bond dollars to pay for the turf fields. But the other thing that'll save is the maintenance and operation side of not only the water, but the labor side too, and the chemicals that are put on the fields. So we definitely feel like that will help on the maintenance and operation side related to water and chemicals and labor.
And Mr. Worth, if I can add on to that as well, this is Frank. The other thing is, recently we've had a hard time with the labor market for our landscape and crews, and we have an awesome crew, and they do just about anything, but this will allow us to shift some of those duties elsewhere and manage our other buildings and our other landscape needs rather than going for outside contracts.
I guess if it for water, I'd probably vote no, but the water is a huge issue and the shortage is therefore, so I will vote yes. So when it's my turn to vote.
Okay, so the payback, I think you said, is now at 8 to 9 years. I think we started at 6 to 7, if I remember.
The number that I know is 8 years at this point of when that would be if you took all capital expenditures, everything into consideration. Yes. We are funded a little bit different because we have bond dollars that we utilize, but then on the maintenance and operation side, we can utilize the savings we have for that to spend on teachers or classrooms and programs. So it works a little different for us.
Okay. Price isn't going to go up again, I hope.
What was that?
So the cost isn't going to go up again, I hope.
Yeah, and it could, potentially could. Absolutely.
4 more to do after this one, right?
And they'll each come back to you as a governing board to approve.
Yep. The hard thing about doing football fields is there's only so many you can do a year because everybody wants to be on them all the time. My apologies to everybody. I should have gotten a motion on the table before we had discussion on it. So could we go ahead and get a motion?
Yes, I move we approve core construction for turf conversion at Basha High School in the amount of $2,874,699.
All right. Could we get a second?
I'll second.
All right. Good deal. And we can continue discussion. Does anybody else have any other comments or questions on it?
So
I do.
at what frequency are we going to do the next 5? Is it like 1 per year or something, or?
And Tom would have the exact dates and times, but I do believe we're going to try to do the next 4 over the next year and a half.
The last, Mr. Roars, the last one will probably be Chandler High, we believe, and that will go, and it will be ready before the football season, but it'll probably go right into August.
All right. I think Ms. Marsden has the question also.
What is the safety issues for students utilizing the artificial turf fields compared to the grass fields? Do we have any data on that?
We do have data on that. I could have Tom send that to you. I wish I was the expert on that. I can say I'm not, but and actually Jason might know more.
Actually, I do know a little bit about it. The science behind it is it's called impaction testing. So they have a test where you just drop a ball of a certain size and density and measure how far it bounces off of it off the field. So a hard packed football field, if you fall on that and you hit your head, it's gonna knock you out depending on how hard you hit it. But if you're on a turf field, it's got a better cushion, and that cushioning doesn't go away. A turf field, that's part of the maintenance. They're always having to aerate the fields to kind of fluff them up and get that absorption in the soil to keep it from being hard packed. And that's one of the selling points on doing turf fields is it's actually quite a bit safer as far as like concussions and things like that.
And I would imagine too that if that's one reason why that we're keeping other groups off of those fields, not just for the turf itself, but because of the compaction issues.
Yeah.
Because I remember Frank Fletcher a number of years ago saying that it is the amount of work that they have to aerate those fields and keep them within spec for the lack of compaction. And
Right.
Oh, yeah.
it was very difficult.
Compaction is an issue on all of our fields. We also look at our compaction rates on our elementary fields and playgrounds as well. That's all measured by our landscape crews. But also growing season. You only get one growing season, and once it's trampled, you pretty much have to returf it. So
yeah, and if you go by, I live at the edge of the district over by one of the Gilbert schools, and they have turf on their field, and it's used all the time. Every night there's somebody on that field doing boys soccer, girls soccer, football, flag football, band. There's somebody on there all the time.
Okay.
Well, this may be an unfair question to you, but Tom's not available, but they said the fields aren't as hot as they used to be. Can you explain why they're better than they used to be relating to that issue on heat?
Again, I think Jason probably can answer that the very best too, so I'm going to let Jason answer some of that too. But I do know that Tom's talked about it's improved drastically. Just the engineering of it, the new technology related to it has kept it. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, they have new fills, new materials that they use for filler in the fields that help it. They have water cannons you could spray out before people play on it that cools it off, and then also the solar reflective index that they have. Basically pigments that they use in the grasses now that help. I mean, it's still going to be hot. It's still going to be hotter than grass, but it's a lot better than it used to be.
Now, do the different colors of field, are all our fields going to be green? Or are they going to do them by colors of school? And is the colors, does that increase or decrease?
Ms. Worth, they'll be green. Let's put it that way, because we've already gotten requests, and we're going to play on green grass. We'll be marching bands on green grass, so they will be green. There'll be highlights. We've seen some versions of what the logos look like, and the highlights will have the school colors in them, but the grass itself will reflect a nice green, realistic grass. It's not going to look like Boise State, no.
All right, no bluegrass. All right. Does anybody else have any other questions or? Ms. Rono?
Just affirming also support. There's good warranties that come with it. I know that they presented on that also, and I think it's a positive.
All right. If nobody has anything else, I'd like to go ahead and take a vote of the board. Everybody in favor of going ahead with the turf field at Bishop, please say aye. Aye?
Aye.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, everyone. That brings us to our next item up for business, 6.03, discussion of possible action to direct staff to draft a new policy regarding limitations on use of unrestricted reserve funds. Would anybody like to make a motion, or would we like to take some information from Ms. Berry?
Right, Mr. President, members of the board. So the district governing board has adopted a resolution placing an annual limitation on the use of unrestricted reserve funds, often referred to as contingency funds, as a matter of sound accounting practice. The district governing board may want to consider adopting the limitation as policy. Staff is seeking direction from the governing board on whether staff should prepare such a policy draft for the governing board review and potential adoption, and if so, what the governing board would like to see included in such draft policy. So tonight what I'd like to do is I'd like to cover three things. I first want to make sure I cover Mr. Rohr's had sent a request in to Mr. Olive and ultimately comes to the district administration, and I want to talk a little bit about that to explain. The number two thing is, how do we take a request or a proposal or an idea or a draft piece of language, and how do we create it into policy, guided by our policy, because we do have policies that guide how that process works. So I want to educate. I know we have new board members, and I know we don't a lot of times do non-compliance policy very often, so it's a good thing to discuss and explain to also our public about how that process works. The third thing I want to do is I want to discuss what we've already done and put in place related to the resolution that we had discussed last fall. And I know we have new board members since January, and in January we approved a policy that we've been discussing in the fall and then approved it in January. So I just want to go through that history and discussion so that you can make a good decision about how you would like to direct us going into the future. So I'm going to give you an attachment right now that has 4 different things. If you don't, Mr. Narducci, could I have you hand those to them? Sorry, and Donna and Veronica. I have a document that has 4 different pieces on it that I just want to be able to give to you for reference, and again, for discussion and potential, again, action for tonight. The first document, it'll say, is 1A. This was a request from board member Roars, who asked us for a new CUSD policy, DIB, for contingency reserve funding. And so I wanted to go over that because we actually have a DIB policy. And so at first we have to understand what that is. Is it a replacement of DIB, or are you asking for a new policy? So 1B is actually our policy, DIB. DIB is General Purpose Revolving Fund. So I just wanted to make clear really quickly that we cannot replace DIB. That is a specific legislative action related to revolving funds. And so that policy has to stay in place. So what I believe his request is, and we can clarify that again today in discussion, is for a new policy. So in a sense, that's what's considered an idea or a proposal. So how governing board members are, or any of you as constituents, administration, anyone can present an idea or proposal. It comes to us and we'll cover that. So what I want to talk about now is, how does that look? And then we'll get back into discussion, but how do we take a policy or request for a policy, and how does that process happen? So if you'll go to 2A, 2A is Governing Board Policy BG, and it specifically tells you how to process when someone, again, a board member or the public, wants to bring a new policy. And I'm going to read it because I think it's important. It's the intent of the board to adopt policies so that they may serve as guidelines for its own operations and for the success and efficiency functions of the district. Policy adoption is one of the board's chief responsibilities. Suggestions regarding the content of policies may be originated with a member of the board, the superintendent, a staff member, a parent, a student, a consultant, a civic group, or any resident of the district. A careful and orderly process shall be used in examining such proposals. The policy proposals shall be referred to the administration for detailed study prior to the recommendations being provided to the board. The board may take action in accordance with policy BGB after hearing the superintendent's recommendations. The policy of the boards are framed and intended to be interpreted within the context of applicable laws and regulations. So the reason I bring that up is this is what Mr. Roars is for us just going forward. When there is when someone wants to put a policy in place, the process is it's a proposal, and for a number of reasons. The reason this is put in place is because, for one, you might already have a policy like we do. We already have a DIB policy that has to stay in place and it cannot be replaced. So that's part of the understanding of that process. The second thing is that we have to send that over to legal to get interpreted. And so there's what's called compliance policies and there's non-compliance policies. Compliance policies are when the legislature sets law and they ultimately pass it through, the attorneys revise it, then you'll hear like Dr. Gilbert, he'll come up and present those rulings, and we're going to go through BGB in a minute, and that's how we process policies. There's non-compliance policies which are not driven by the legislature, but it might be a policy that you all feel or a civic group wants to put in place. That has to be vetted through our attorneys, and then it has to make sure it matches laws and it is according to the USFR. So unfortunately, the way when someone writes a policy, it might not meet their criteria for a policy. Legally, it might not meet the requirements of a policy, or it needs to have a different new number that's associated. And so that's why you can't just have a first reading of a policy that someone just drafts in that sense, because ultimately you'll have some conflicts and problems within that. But what you want to do in the future is bring a proposal or an idea forward, and then we vet it through, we explain it to the governing board, and the governing board then, with a consensus of approval, tells us administration to go and have our attorneys create the policy to bring back to you. And then we follow, which is 2B, you can see the next one, which is BGB, we follow the policy process of adopting a policy. So once the board says and gives us direction to have our attorneys create the policy with the content that you want for it, then we go through the BGB process, and if you read through that, it tells you how to go through a first read and a second read once the first part is finished with, again, suggesting it, having the administration review it, comes back to the board has a consensus vote to give us the direction to create the policy, utilizing our attorneys who match it up with either the state laws, or they have to go look at other states and they have to have a starting point to start that process. All right, the third thing I want to show you is the work that we did and to review what we have done in the past. So if you look at number 3, it is the resolution that you adopted as a board in January, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the history of what has taken place related to the resolution. About 5 years ago, we had, as a board, had a couple planning sessions where we talked about a resolution or a policy or a regulation where we were able to talk about the use of our unrestricted reserve funds. There's multiple funds, as you all know, 65 different funds in our school district. And so how do we take our unrestricted funds and how do we make sure that we don't spend those all in one year and we're smart financially with that? And that actually came from a conversation when we were in San Francisco and a few other conversations. Mr. Worth was a big part of that, but a conversation again when we went to San Francisco and we were at Moody's, and they always are looking at how much money we have in our specific funds, again, in our different 65 funds. Do we have reserves? They want to know you have reserves. Chandler Unified does have additional dollars in specific funds set aside as reserves, and that's helped us. As you know, we went from a AA to a AAA. It's been very important in financial planning. They know that we're financially secure and ready and prepared for the future. So with that, we brought it back. We discussed it in a couple different planning sessions related to having either a regulation, a policy, and then we just didn't continue with that after we had a few discussions on it. And so back in the fall, Mr. Worth had originally asked again if we could go ahead and bring up that topic again and put together either a resolution or a regulation or something to guide the in a sense what we kept calling contingency funds, but it's our unrestricted funds. Can we talk about that and bring something forward? We did, so we brought it to the board in November, and we brought it to a planning session in November, discussed it, and our attorney gave us some advice on a resolution, and because there is no statutory requirement for this, also there's not another school district that has something specific, so this is us, that we created this through our attorney, and then again in December, we brought it forward, and I just wanted to read the specifics. The district governing board shall use no more than 10% of available unrestricted reserve funds identified by the district CFO or director of finance from the prior fiscal year AFR, which is an annual financial report, in any budget year while the resolution is in effect. The resolution shall be in effect through June 30th of 2026, and then prior to renewal or change in the allowed usage of unrestricted reserve funds, the district shall review the impact of the use unrestricted reserve funds under this resolution on the district's financial needs. And so we had brought that and it was approved. At that time, there was discussion if you would like to change this or make this into a policy, we can definitely, you can direct us to do that at this point to change, or we can obviously, we could add additional things to that if that's the direction of the board. So I wanted to bring that so you knew what we had already done. Our board has worked on this for a few years, and again last fall, and then adopted in January. I also wanted to bring you back to 1A, which was the request from Mr. Board Member Roars. And unfortunately, there was a number of, we can't utilize this language, but we could take some ideas from that if you want us to. We do not have a contingency fund, that there is not a contingency fund underneath school districts. As you know, states have rainy day funds, cities have rainy day funds. We have specific funds like the Maintenance and Operations Fund, the Classroom Dollar Fund, the Debt Service Fund, federal funds, state funds, very specific other funds that are called others. They have restrictions on those. So we have to use specific words according to the USFR and according to our legislative guidelines and legislative laws that are in place. So our attorney would have to take this, put it into a policy if the board directs us to do that, and then we could put something in place to meet those needs. So I wanted to make sure everyone knew the process, knew what we needed to do, and then we're open for any direction you want to give us at this point.
Well, I'd like to make one. Good.
All right, thank you, Ms. Berry. In order to discuss this, we ought to get a motion on the table. Does anybody have a motion?
I move to direct the district administration to develop a policy for reserve funding based on the suggestions that I've made here this evening.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have a second? Okay, so that motion fails for lack of a second. Does anybody else have a motion? All right. We don't have a second for a motion, we can move on to our next order of business. 6.04 is approval of hearing officer's recommendations to expel student 2023-0628. Could I get a motion?
Mr. President?
I'm sorry, I'm presenting it real quick.
Oh,
President, all the members of the board, consideration hearing officer's recommendation to expel student 2023-0628 as you reviewed and previewed prior.
okay. Thank you, Frank. I'm sorry. Could I get a motion?
Mr. President, I move to approve the hearing officer's recommendation to expel student 2023-0628.
Thank you. Could I get a second, please?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor of expelling student 2023-0628, please say aye.
Aye. Hear from Joel.
Joel, did you say aye?
Aye, sorry.
Okay, thank you, sir. All right, that motion carries. That brings us to our CUSD board agenda roadmap. Upcoming things are the meeting on, sorry, I've got to navigate here. The meeting on July 12th, we're going to go over finances again with Lana, the public hearing for adoption of the 2023-2024 budget. We're going to do a hearing on the truth and taxation as well. And we're going to talk about ASBA annual dues.
President Evolve, we're also going to have an executive session. We'll get that on the roadmap.
Okay.
For goals.
For goals. Okay. Wonderful. Thank you. That brings us to our CUSD board member current events. We'll start with Joel. Joel, do you have anything new this week?
I guess I can do it. I'm not 100% sure it's a current event, but the clarification in my mind is board can make any policy it wants as long as it doesn't violate law. And I'm not sure we down that road, but anyway. The board can make that decision as long as it doesn't violate law. But that's something we can talk about in the future if you want.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Ms. Mosna, do you have anything today?
Yes, I do. I did attend one of the chamber's events where they were talking about education issues, and it was a roundtable discussion. It was a very good discussion on some things that, we can get support from the chamber and the businesses within the community. So it was a very worthwhile adventure. I would also like to honor Donna Nye tonight. She has been, I've worked with her for how many years now? 12 years?
Did you bring the funny hat?
On the board, yeah, with when being on the board, and earlier with doing some volunteer work and hanging around the district doing that work. Donna has been absolutely amazing, and anytime you come to her with where is this, I can't find that, and she is right on it and knows exactly where it is, and it has been just a real joy to work with her over the years. The board has come together and got you a little gift, and so Donna, this is from all of us, and it should help you with your travels in retirement.
All right. Congratulations, Donna. Thank you very much. All right. That's awesome. Thank you, Donna. Ms. Serrano, do you have anything for us today?
I'll be short tonight, actually. I just want to express my gratitude to Donna as well. I am obviously a new board member, but I can attest that Donna keeps the wheel turning for this team, and I really appreciate it. And I'm so thrilled that she was able to spend time with the incoming assistant we'll have with Veronica King to do an exceptional job as well. But we will dearly miss her, even though I didn't get to work directly with her too long, but it was exceptional for the period that we did work together. So thank you again, Donna. And I guess I'd also just like to express my gratitude to our administration, particularly our CFO, who had a lot of work tonight. And I'm a proud board member here in CUSD to know that we have these unrestricted funds available to us. We didn't get to discuss them, but I just want to make sure the public understands that that is absolutely what got CUSD through COVID. Without those funds, we would have been in a greater place of uncertainty to provide our COA platform that we all took part in, including myself. So that's really important to know. There are things that can't be predicted like COVID, and it's great to know that we have these funds and we deserve these funds because it's in the best interest of our schools. There are other factors, of course, looming with uncertainty. We all know we have the AEL challenge every year for us. Again, we have these reserves knowing that we can finish the school year. That's a really big deal. ESAs, of course, have, I think, gone over 1,000% of what was formerly predicted. So this is really important funding, I just want to express, and I'm really happy to report that we can even have this discussion because we are CUSD and we have a great team. So kudos to our team for providing us with this funding, and I'm really happy that we in CUSD have it. Thanks.
All right. Mr. Roars, do you have anything for us today?
Yeah, I'd also like to express my appreciation for Donna and I and her graciousness and patience in bringing us on. She was absolutely invaluable in getting up to speed and all the things that we have to do in answering all our silly questions and getting us through to get up here and perform as board members. So thank you very much, and we're really going to miss you. And to Ms. King, really looking forward to working with you. I think she's just as gracious and patient as Donna is. So thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Roars. I have three things. First, everybody hang around for a couple of minutes. We need to all sign a piece of paper that we have up here. Second thing is I owe Kurt Roars a bit of an apology. I'm sorry it took so long to get something you wanted to get on the agenda because it was an unusual request, and we just didn't know how to go about doing it. And you know, this whole thing about, well, if we're going to get lawyers involved and they have to write policy and spend money doing it, it's like, oh, wait a minute, we got to all vote on this first. So that's that, and the end of school and summer break kind of threw a monkey wrench in the works. So that's why it took longer than it should have. So my apologies on
We actually
taking.
never voted on the policy, by the way.
Well, we didn't vote on it, but we got it on the agenda anyway. Next is Donna. I just wanted to say thank you very much. You've been awesome. And with that brings us to the end of. Oh, Joel, did you already go?
No, I'm here.
Oh, do you have any comments for us today?
No, I'm good. I made the one comment. I'm good.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.